Young cashier pays for a hungry mother's groceries, unaware the undercover CEO is in line behind. The fluorescent lights above register 3 buzz with their familiar dying hum, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made even fresh produce look tired. Emma Rodriguez rubbed her eyes and glanced at the clock mounted behind the customer service desk. 9:47 p.m. Just 13 more minutes until she could flip that closed sign and escape this place that smelled permanently of floor cleaner and overripe bananas. Her phone vibrated against her hip. A text from her little brother Tyler. Mom called again. Said she's sending more money next week but rent is due tomorrow. Also, my backpack strap broke. Emma's stomach clenched. She typed back quickly, "Don't worry about the rent. I got it covered. We'll fix your backpack this weekend." She didn't have the rent covered. Not even close. But Tyler didn't need to know that. At 19, she was supposed to be worrying about midterm exams and whether Jake from her psychology class would finally ask her out. Instead, she was calculating whether she could survive on ramen noodles for another week so Tyler could have proper lunch money. The store felt different tonight. Emptier than usual, sure, but there was something else. A weird tension in the air that made her skin crawl. Maybe it was the new cameras. They'd installed them everywhere last month, sleek black domes that seemed to follow her movements. Management said they were part of some fancy new system to enhance customer experience and optimize operational efficiency. Corporate speak for spying on employees, if you asked Emma. But the cameras weren't the worst part. It was the screen mounted behind her register that she tried to ignore. Throughout her shift, it would flash little notifications. Customer profile, budget-conscious shopper recommended upsell, premium brand substitution alert, potential theft risk monitor closely. The system was creepy. It claimed it could predict what customers would do before they did it, based on how they walked, what they picked up, even how they looked around the store. Emma had watched it flag a grandmother buying birthday cake ingredients as a potential shoplifter, just because she kept checking her shopping list. She'd seen it classify a teenage boy as a high-value customer and suggest expensive add-ons, only for the kid to pay with crumpled dollar bills he'd obviously been saving for weeks. The worst part? The screen was usually right about the money part. It could predict to the penny how much someone was willing to spend. But it missed everything that actually mattered: the stories behind those dollars, the sacrifices, the desperate hope in people's eyes when they counted out their change. "Attention associates." The intercom crackled to life, making Emma jump. "Please remember that the new predictive customer intelligence system is designed to maximize both customer satisfaction and store profitability. Trust the data. Follow the prompts. Corporate out." Emma rolled her eyes. She'd rather trust her instincts, thank you very much. In the 6 months she'd worked here, she'd learned to read people in ways no computer ever could. The way someone's shoulders slumped when they realized they couldn't afford everything in their cart. The guilty glance toward the candy aisle when a parent was trying to decide between their own small pleasure and their kid's lunch money. The careful counting and recounting of bills that meant the difference between eating well and eating at all. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her roommate Jessica. "Pete, some money in the jar got us through the weekend, but we're out of everything. Toothpaste, shampoo, even toilet paper. Can you grab some after work?" Emma looked at her employee discount card, then at her empty wallet. Her last paycheck had gone to Tyler's school supplies and her share of utilities. Her next one wouldn't come for another week. She could borrow from the register. Lots of employees did it, just took a 20 and paid it back next shift. But May had never been able to bring herself to cross that line, even when the line between surviving and drowning got thinner every month. The automatic doors whooshed open, letting in a blast of cold October air that carried the scent of approaching rain. A figure shuffled in, someone moving slowly, deliberately. Emma straightened up, putting on her customer service smile even though her feet ached and her lower back felt like it was held together with dental floss and pure stubbornness. Working retail had taught her that everyone who walked through those doors was fighting some kind of battle. Her job wasn't just to scan barcodes and count change. It was to make sure that for just a few minutes people felt seen, heard, treated like human beings instead of walking wallets. The screen above her register flickered to life as the figure approached, its sensors already analyzing and categorizing. But Emma kept her eyes on the person, not the data. Because she'd learned something that no artificial intelligence could understand. Sometimes the most important thing you could do for another person was simply pay attention. The fluorescent light flickered again, casting shifting shadows across the produce section. In the distance, she could hear the soft hum of the refrigeration units, and the almost silent whir of security cameras rotating in their housings, watching, recording, analyzing everything. But what they couldn't measure, what their algorithms couldn't predict, was what happened when two people met in a moment of genuine need. What they couldn't calculate was the value of kindness, or the way a single gesture could ripple outward in ways that would reshape everything. As the figure got closer, Emma could see it was a woman, young but worn down, pushing something ahead of her. The screen behind Emma was already flashing its preliminary assessment, but she ignored it, focusing instead on what her eyes and heart were telling her. Because sometimes, the most important data wasn't digital at all. The clock ticked toward closing time, and Emma had no idea that the next 10 minutes would change not just her life, but the entire future of the company she worked for. All she knew was that someone needed help, and she was going to do whatever she could to provide it. Even if it meant the difference between eating dinner tomorrow and going hungry. Even if it meant taking a risk that could cost her the job she desperately needed. Some things, Emma had learned, were worth more than security. And sometimes, the most revolutionary act was simply being human. The woman who entered through the automatic doors looked like she was carrying the weight of the world on her narrow shoulders. Emma noticed her immediately, not because of what the screen was flashing above her register, but because of the way the woman moved, as if every step required a conscious decision to keep going. She was probably in her mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and wearing a faded jacket that had seen better seasons. But what caught Emma's attention was what she was pushing, an old stroller with squeaky wheels, and inside it, a baby who couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 months old, sleeping peacefully despite the harsh fluorescent lighting. The woman paused near the produce section, pulling something from her jacket pocket. Even from 20 feet away, Emma could see it was a piece of paper, wrinkled and worn like it had been folded and unfolded dozens of times. The woman smoothed it carefully against her palm, studying it with the intensity of someone reading a treasure map. Emma's screen lit up with its assessment: customer profile, high-risk limited spending capacity. Estimated purchase, $12 to $15. Suggests standard processing only. But Emma wasn't looking at the screen. She was watching the woman's face as she read that crumpled paper, and she saw something there that no algorithm could measure: hope mixed with desperate determination. The woman began moving through the store with purpose, but also with visible restraint. She picked up a small bag of flour, checked the price, then put it back and selected an even smaller one. She studied the canned tomatoes for a full minute, comparing prices per ounce, before choosing the store brand. One yellow onion went into her basket, then a small package of ground beef from the markdown section. Emma watched this careful dance of necessity and want, recognizing it from her own shopping trips. The way the woman's hand hovered over a bunch of fresh herbs before moving on. The longing glance at the pre-made pasta sauce before selecting the cheapest can of tomato paste instead. The internal calculation that Emma knew all too well: every penny counted when you didn't have enough pennies to begin with. The baby stirred in the stroller, making soft sounds that weren't quite crying but suggested he might wake up soon. The woman immediately crouched down, gently rocking the stroller and whispering something Emma couldn't hear. There was such tenderness in the gesture, such careful attention, that Emma felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. When the woman finally approached the register, Emma could see the piece of paper more clearly. It was handwritten in faded blue ink, with some words crossed out and rewritten. At the top, in careful cursive, were the words, "Mama's healing stew. Did you find everything you needed tonight?" Emma asked, falling back on her standard greeting, though she already suspected the answer. The woman managed a tired smile. "I think so. I hope so." Her voice was soft, with just a hint of an accent Emma couldn't place. "I'm trying to make something special for him," she added, glancing down at the baby who was now awake and looking around with bright, curious eyes. As Emma began scanning the items, she noticed the woman's hands. They were clean but rough, with small cuts that looked like they came from hard work. Her nails were short and unpolished, and she kept fidgeting with a thin gold ring on her left hand, turning it around and around like it was a worry stone. "Flour, tomato paste, onion, ground beef," Emma said as she scanned each item. "Sounds like you're making something delicious." "It's my mother's recipe," the woman said, touching the crumpled paper. "She passed 2 years ago, but I was never much of a cook. But my baby Marcus, he's starting to eat real food now, and I thought..." She trailed off, looking embarrassed. "I thought maybe if I could make her stew, it would be like she's still here, you know? Like she's still taking care of us." Emma's heart clenched. She understood that feeling, the desperate need to connect with someone you'd lost, to keep their love alive through small rituals and remembered recipes. The total came up on the screen, $18.47. The woman opened a small canvas purse and began counting out bills and coins. Emma watched as she laid out a $10 bill, then 5 ones, then began counting quarters. The pile of change grew slowly, quarters, dimes, nickels, and finally pennies. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her cheeks flushing red. "Let me just..." She started setting aside items, beginning with the ground beef. "I can do without the meat. The flour and tomatoes are the most important parts anyway." Emma looked at the crumpled recipe, at the sleeping baby, at the woman's hands still counting and recounting the same coins. Behind them, she was vaguely aware of another customer getting in line, a man in a hoodie, but all her attention was focused on the decision forming in her mind. A decision that would change everything. Emma's fingers paused over the register keys as she watched the woman, who had quietly introduced herself as Sophia, carefully set the ground beef aside. The crumpled recipe in Sophia's other hand seemed to tremble slightly, and Emma could see her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "The stew won't be the same without the meat," Sophia whispered, more to herself than to Emma. "Mama always said the beef was what made it healing food, not just regular food. But maybe..." She forced another smile, this one more brittle than the last. "Maybe we can pretend, right, Marcus?" The baby gurgled in response, reaching up toward his mother with tiny fists. Sophia's face softened as she bent to kiss his forehead, and Emma saw something in that moment that the screen above her register would never capture: the fierce, protective love of a mother who would give up anything for her child, even her own memories. Emma looked at the total again, $18.47. Then she looked at the pile of money Sophia had managed to count out, $14.23. The difference was $4.24, less than what Emma spent on a coffee and muffin most mornings when she wasn't broke. But right now, it might as well have been $1,000. Behind them, the man in the hoodie shifted slightly, and Emma caught a glimpse of him in her peripheral vision. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair peeking out from under his hood. He stood perfectly still, watching the interaction with an intensity that should have made Emma uncomfortable. Instead, something about his presence felt oddly neutral, like he was studying them without judgment. Emma's screen flashed a new notification: customer spending deficit detected. Suggests store policy enforcement. No exceptions authorized. She stared at those words for a moment, then at Sophia, who was now trying to figure out if she could afford the tomato paste without the onion, or the onion without the tomato paste. Marcus began to fuss, perhaps sensing his mother's distress, and Sophia started that gentle rocking motion again, the stroller wheels squeaking softly against the linoleum floor. "I'm sorry," Sophia said again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I had enough. I counted it 3 times at home, but I guess I miscounted somewhere." Emma made her decision. Her hands moved quickly, almost without conscious thought. She clicked the discount override button, something she'd only used a few times for damaged items or price adjustments. The ground beef, originally $4.99, suddenly showed up as $2.99. The flour dropped from $3.49 to $2.49. Small adjustments that would look like computer glitches or legitimate markdowns if anyone questioned them later. The new total, $13.47. But Sophia was still 76 cents short. Emma glanced around quickly. The store manager had left an hour ago, and the only other employee was Marcus from the deli department, who was busy cleaning the meat slicer in the back. The man in the hoodie remained silent, watching. Without hesitation, Emma reached into her own pocket and pulled out her employee discount card. She swiped it, applying her own 10% discount to the entire transaction. Then, as Sophia counted out her money one more time, Emma quietly slipped a dollar bill from her own wallet into the mix. "There we go," Emma said brightly, as if nothing unusual had happened. "That comes to exactly $14.23. Sophia looked up, confusion flickering across her tired features. "But I thought, didn't you say it was more?" "Computer must have recalculated," Emma said, meeting Sophia's eyes directly. "You know how these systems are, always updating prices and applying automatic discounts." For a moment, Sophia just stared at her. Then, slowly, understanding dawned in her eyes. Her hand flew to her mouth, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't let you. You're not letting me do anything," Emma said firmly, bagging the groceries with careful attention to putting the heavier items on the bottom. "The computer calculated your total. That's all that happened here." She reached behind the register where they kept the promotional materials and grabbed a coupon she'd noticed earlier. $5 off your next purchase of $20 or more. It was supposed to be given to customers who spent over $50, but Emma folded it carefully and slipped it into Sophia's bag. "This was in the system too," she said. "For next time." Sophia was crying openly now, but trying to stay quiet so she wouldn't wake Marcus. "Thank you," she mouthed, her voice completely gone. Emma handed her the receipt and the bag, their fingers touching briefly. Sophia's hands were shaking. "Make it with love," Emma said softly. "That's what makes it healing food." Behind them, the man in the hoodie stepped forward as Sophia gathered her things. He didn't say anything, didn't smile or nod, but Emma caught him watching Sophia push her stroller toward the exit with something that looked almost like approval in his eyes. As the automatic doors closed behind Sophia and Marcus, Emma turned to her next customer, her heart pounding with the knowledge that she just risked her job for a woman whose last name she didn't even know. But as she looked at the man in the hoodie, something told her that the biggest risk was yet to come. The man stepped forward with a measured pace that somehow made Emma's pulse quicken. Up close, she could see weathered hands and expensive sneakers that didn't quite match the casual hoodie and faded jeans. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but not unkind, the eyes of someone who noticed everything and forgot nothing. "Good evening," he said simply, placing a single bottle of water on the conveyor belt. Emma scanned the water, $1.79, and tried to ignore the way he was studying her face. The screen above her register identified him only as Customer ID, Unknown Payment Method, Cash. But there was something else flashing that made her stomach drop. Transaction Review flagged previous customer. Her hands trembled slightly as she announced the total. The man handed her $2, exact change plus tip, and their eyes met for just a moment. In that brief connection, Emma saw something that made her blood run cold: recognition. Not of her, but of what she'd just done. "Keep the change," he said quietly. As Emma opened the register to put away the bills, she caught sight of something that made her freeze. The man was holding a small device, not a phone, but something that looked like a tablet. On its screen, she could see security camera footage. Multiple angles of the store, time-stamped from just minutes ago. And there, clear as day, was footage of her price adjustments, her employee discount, the moment she'd slipped her own dollar into Sophia's payment. Emma's mouth went dry. Interesting evening," the man said, pocketing the device. His voice was calm, almost conversational, But Emma detected something underneath. Not anger, exactly, but intense focus. That woman, with the baby. She seemed grateful. I just processed her transaction. Emma managed, her voice barely steady. Standard procedure. The man nodded slowly, but his eyes never left hers. Standard procedure. Right. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Tell me, do you always apply that many adjustments during standard procedure? Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This was how she lost her job, maybe even faced charges for theft. Tyler would have to find another way to pay for school supplies. Jessica would have to cover rent alone. Everything she'd worked for, gone because she couldn't stand to watch a young mother choose between ingredients for her baby's food. Look, she started, surprising herself with the steadiness that crept into her voice. If you're going to report me, just do it. But that woman needed help, and sometimes helping people is more important than following every rule perfectly. The man's eyebrows rose slightly. You think I'm going to report you? Aren't you? Emma challenged, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. You're obviously not just some random customer. That device, the way you were watching, the questions, you're either corporate or loss prevention or something. For the first time, the man's expression shifted. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. Something like that, he admitted. My name is Barrett Langford. The name hit Emma like a physical blow. Barrett Langford, the CEO of Megamart Corporation, the company that owned this store and 847 others across the country. She'd seen his picture in the employee break room, usually accompanying memos about efficiency improvements and cost-cutting measures. What was he doing here, at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, buying a bottle of water and watching her break company policy? Mr. Langford, she stammered. I can explain. He held up a hand. I've been visiting stores across the region for the past 6 months. Part of an initiative to understand how our new predictive customer intelligence system works in real-world conditions. His eyes flicked toward the screen above her register. Do you know what that system recommended for the previous customer? Emma shook her head, though she suspected she knew. Flag her as a potential loss risk. Suggest strict policy enforcement. No exceptions, no discounts, no flexibility. Barrett's voice carried a note Emma couldn't identify. The algorithm calculated that she was likely to leave items behind, potentially cause delays, and generate negative profit margins through returns or complaints. But she didn't do any of those things, Emma said. No, Barrett agreed. She didn't. Instead, she left here with exactly what she needed, plus a coupon for next time, and a story she'll probably tell for years about the kindness of strangers. He paused. The system didn't predict that outcome. It doesn't account for human variables. Emma wasn't sure if this was better or worse than being fired on the spot. Are you testing me? Is this some kind of corporate experiment? In a way, Barrett said, his expression growing more serious. For months, I've been pushing this company toward data-driven decisions. Maximum efficiency, minimum waste, everything measured and optimized. I believed that was the future of retail. He gestured toward the door where Sophia had exited. But I've been watching interactions like this in stores across the country, and I'm starting to wonder if we're optimizing for the wrong things. The system sees a customer who can't afford her groceries as a problem to be managed. You saw a mother trying to feed her child as a person to be helped. Emma didn't know what to say. This felt surreal, having a philosophical conversation about corporate policy with the CEO of the company while standing at her register at closing time. So what happens now? She asked. Barrett was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested this conversation was about much more than one evening's transaction. No, he said. I have to decide whether the future of this company lies with the algorithms, or with people like you. 3 days later, Barrett Langford sat at the head of a gleaming conference table on the 42nd floor of Megamart's corporate headquarters, staring at a wall-mounted screen that displayed Emma's interaction with Sophia in crystal-clear detail. Around the table, 12 of the company's top executives and data analysts waited for him to speak. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. "Play it again," Barrett finally said. Dr. Jennifer Chin, the head of predictive analytics, shifted in her chair. "Sir, we've watched this footage 6 times. The employee clearly violated multiple protocols. Price manipulation, unauthorized discounts, personal financial contribution to a customer transaction." I said play it again. The video rolled once more. Barrett watched Emma's face as she made those split-second decisions, saw the moment she chose compassion over compliance. He watched Sophia's tears, the gentle way she rocked her baby, the crumpled recipe that represented so much more than ingredients for a meal. When it ended, Barrett leaned back in his chair. "Tell me what the predictive customer intelligence system recommended for this situation." Marcus Webb, the VP of Operations, consulted his tablet. "Standard enforcement protocol. No exceptions. The customer showed multiple risk indicators: limited funds, emotional distress, likelihood of future payment issues. The system calculated an 87% probability of negative outcomes if we deviated from policy." And what actually happened? The customer received unauthorized assistance and left the store satisfied, Dr. Chen said, her tone suggesting this was somehow problematic. "But sir, this represents a dangerous precedent. If employees start making emotional decisions instead of following data-driven protocols." "The customer also spent $14 instead of walking out with nothing," Barrett interrupted. "She received a $5 coupon, increasing the likelihood of return visits. And she left with a positive impression that she'll likely share with others." He paused. "Did the system predict any of those outcomes?" Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. "Sir, the system is designed for scalability. We can't have 30,000 employees making individual judgment calls based on emotional responses. It would be chaos." "Would it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Barrett stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. Somewhere down there, in apartment buildings and small houses, were thousands of people like Sophia, struggling to make ends meet, trying to create moments of love and connection despite overwhelming circumstances. "I've spent the last 6 months promoting this system," Barrett said, his back still to the room. "I've given presentations to shareholders about efficiency gains and profit optimization. I've eliminated positions and reduced training budgets, all in service of algorithmic perfection." He turned around, his expression unreadable. "But watching that footage, I keep coming back to one question. When did we decide that a mother's tears don't matter as much as a profit margin?" The room erupted in nervous murmurs. Robert Hutchins, the chief financial officer, cleared his throat. "Barrett, with respect, sentiment doesn't pay dividends. The AI system has increased our quarterly profits by 18%. Customer complaints are down, theft is down, efficiency metrics are. Are we building a company or running a prison?" Barrett's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Because watching that screen, I see a choice between 2 futures. One where we optimize every human interaction until we've removed the humanity entirely. And another where we trust our people to make decisions that algorithms can't measure." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her data-driven mind clearly struggling with this philosophical turn. "Sir, the employee's actions were statistically insignificant. One interaction among millions. Every interaction is statistically insignificant until it isn't." Barrett shot back. "That cashier, Emma Rodriguez, made a decision that our $1 million system couldn't predict, wouldn't recommend, and can't quantify. She saw something we programmed our computers to ignore." He moved back to his chair but didn't sit down. "What if we're measuring the wrong things? What if customer loyalty isn't just about price points and transaction speeds? What if it's about feeling seen, understood, valued as a human being?" The CFO looked genuinely concerned now. "Barrett, are you seriously considering scrapping a system we've invested 2 years and $15 million developing?" "I'm considering something more radical than that," Barrett said, his voice gaining strength. I'm considering the possibility that our frontline employees might understand our customers better than our algorithms do." The room fell silent again. Barrett could see the calculations happening behind their eyes: stock prices, board reactions, investor confidence. All the metrics that had driven his own decisions for the past decade. But he kept seeing Sophia's face, Emma's quiet courage, and the question that had been haunting him for 3 sleepless nights: what kind of company did he want to lead? "Schedule a meeting with Emma Rodriguez," he said finally. "I want her here next week." "For disciplinary action?" Dr. Chen asked hopefully. Barrett's smile was the first genuine one he'd worn in months. "For a conversation about the future." Emma's hands shook as she smoothed down her only dress shirt, a wrinkled blue button-down she'd borrowed from Jessica, and stared up at the imposing glass tower that housed Megamart's corporate headquarters. The email had arrived on Monday morning, brief and cryptic. "Ms. Rodriguez, please report to the executive offices on Friday at 2 p.m. Transportation will be provided." She'd spent the entire week convinced she was about to be fired, or worse. Tyler had tried to reassure her over their nightly phone calls, but even his optimistic 17-year-old perspective couldn't shake her growing dread. She'd mentally prepared for unemployment, for having to explain to Jessica why she couldn't make rent, for watching her college dreams slip away because she'd chosen kindness over policy. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like ascending to her own execution. But when she stepped into Barrett Langford's office, a space bigger than her entire apartment, with windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city, she found something completely unexpected. Barrett wasn't alone. Sitting around a small conference table were 3 other people she didn't recognize, all of them smiling warmly as she entered. "Emma," Barrett said, standing to greet her. "Thank you for coming. I know this must seem strange." "Mr. Langford," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "If this is about Tuesday night, I want you to know that I understand if you have to." "Emma," he said gently, gesturing to an empty chair. "You're not in trouble. Quite the opposite, actually." She sat down cautiously, still not daring to hope. Barrett took the seat across from her, his expression serious but kind. "I want you to meet some people," he said. "This is Sarah Martinez, our new Director of Employee Relations. This is Dr. James Patterson, who heads our Customer Experience Innovation team. And this is Lisa Wong, our Chief Human Resources Officer." Emma nodded politely at each of them, still confused. "Emma," Barrett continued, "what you did Tuesday night, what I witnessed, has sparked something of a revolution in this company. We've spent the last week re-examining everything we thought we knew about customer service, employee empowerment, and what it means to run a business that actually serves people." He leaned forward, his eyes intense but warm. "We've made a decision to pause the full rollout of our predictive customer intelligence system. Not because the technology is bad, but because we realized we were asking it to solve the wrong problems." Emma's mind reeled. "I don't understand." Dr. Patterson spoke up, his voice gentle but excited. "Emma, you demonstrated something our algorithms couldn't: emotional intelligence. You saw a customer's real need and found a way to meet it that benefited everyone: the customer, the store, and the company's reputation. That's not something you can program. We want to redesign our entire approach," Sarah Martinez added. "Instead of trying to predict and control customer behavior, we want to empower our frontline employees to use their judgment. To see customers as people, not data points." Barrett pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to Emma. "We're offering you a full scholarship to finish your degree, any program you choose, at any school that accepts you. In exchange, we'd like you to work part-time as a consultant, helping us develop what we're calling the Human Intelligence Initiative." Emma stared at the folder, afraid to open it. I'm just a cashier. I work part-time at one store. How could I possibly?" "You understand something that took me 20 years in corporate leadership to learn," Barrett said. "You understand that behind every transaction is a human story. Every customer who walks through those doors is fighting some kind of battle, celebrating some kind of victory, or just trying to get through another day. Lisa Wang leaned forward. We're creating employee advisory panels at every store. Cashiers, stockers, customer service representatives. The people who actually talk to customers every day. We want their input on policies, procedures, everything. The system will still exist, Dr. Patterson explained. But instead of giving orders, it will provide information. Employees like you will make the final decisions about how to help customers. Emma finally opened the folder. Inside was a scholarship letter, a job offer, and something else that made her gasp, a photograph. It was Sophia, smiling and holding baby Marcus, standing in what looked like a small kitchen. Attached was a handwritten note. Dear Emma, I made Mama's stew. Marcus loved it. Thank you for helping us remember that kindness still exists. Sophia. How did you? Emma started. We found her through the store's customer database, Barrett said quietly. We wanted to see what happened after that night. She's since become a regular customer. She brings Marcus in every week, and she always asks about the nice cashier who helped her. Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks as she stared at the photo. Marcus was bigger now, his face covered in what looked like stew remnants, grinning at the camera with the pure joy that only babies could manage. She doesn't know who I am, Barrett continued. And she doesn't need to. But that night changed everything, for her, for you, for this entire company. Emma looked up at the faces around the table, executives and directors who had somehow found their way back to remembering that business was, at its heart, about people helping people. When do I start? She asked. Barrett smiled. You already have. Outside the windows, the city stretched endlessly in all directions, full of Sophia's and Emma's and moments of quiet heroism that no algorithm would ever capture. But maybe, Emma thought, that was exactly the point.